you have these amazing birth plans, or you just really want to avoid that hospital birth. You're thinking, I just want to stay home. I just want to birth my baby the way nature intended. I know I can do it. Everyone around me is telling me that I can't, but I know that I am capable because, first of all babies come out, like the default exit is vaginal birth. And maybe you've had one C-section, maybe you've had 2 or more C-sections, but you just have that feeling because you've been inspired by VBAC groups and you know that it's possible, but your partner is still scared and not really wanting you to do it. And they're saying no to your home birth, or they're saying no to VBAC even. And you're probably wondering, how the heck do I get them to support me? When your partner, however, is saying that they're not comfortable with home birth, it's not so much that they don't believe that you can do it, but they've just had this culture around us that's basically said that women's bodies are broken. And there's a whole big history with that I went into inside of my classes last week, talking about how the models that we use for labor are based on 17th century ideas about how our bodies are machines. We know that's not true. And then further research has also debunked those myths over and over and over again, and yet the practices still maintain the same. So if you're going for a VBAC, you might want to avoid that hospital birth because you know that there's more VBAC tolerant care providers and more VBAC tolerant hospitals that are setting you up for failure than there are going to be truly supportive in a physiological environment. Because it's hard enough inside the hospital to get a regular physiological birth. But if you've had a cesarean, 1 or 2, or you've been induced, then there's going to be even more stacked against you, and you kind of have to keep fighting to prove that your body can do something that it's going to do anyway. It's terribly frustrating. So the problem, of course, is if your partner's not on board, well, that doesn't rule it out. And I have seen this inside of stories, and actually there was a story not too long ago that I was reading inside Reclaiming Childbirth as a Rite of Passage, where a woman was stating, like, she was anonymous, it was a story, and she was saying how she just did not want to go back to the hospital, and she was planning an unassisted birth, but she wasn't even going to tell her partner because she did not trust him to support her. Because the last time that she had agreed to have him support her inside the hospital, he ended up doing what the care provider wanted, which was against what she wanted and against what she had planned, and that there was no communication there, so she just doesn't trust him. And I just remember reading that story and thinking about how devastating that is. Because the other side of that, when you have a supportive partner, is that their role, they get to step into the role that they were actually meant to be in. So we all have masculine energy and feminine energy in our bodies as humans. And some of us lean more towards the masculine and some of us lean more towards the feminine. As a woman in birthing, you have that feminine energy inside of you, and it's really powerful at the time of pregnancy and birth. And it's all about surrender and tuning into your body and doing what you need to do. So it's tapping into that intuitive nature. You already know how to birth. Even if you didn't take another single class or video or anything, if you had been born in the wild before we had any modern medicine and you didn't get exposed to the cultural aspects of what birth has been taught to be in our society, you would eventually birth your baby, maybe even without pain. Because there was a woman, I think it was in Whitechapel, this was way back in the 1900s, possibly even earlier, where an obstetrician came into this really poor village where this woman had not had any instruction on how labor was going to be, including pain. So he kept trying to give her chloroform and she kept trying to push it away because according to her, it hadn't hurt. So a lot of the fear around birth has become cultural, and your partner has been immersed in that since they were kids. And they're coming in with all these fears, especially if you've previously had a traumatic experience within the medical system. So they're coming from the role, especially if they're highly in their masculine energy, as a father they would be, they want to protect you. But the way that they've been taught to protect is not exactly the way that nature really designed it. They're supposed to hold space for you, and they're supposed to trust that they hold that container to basically make sure that nothing is going to disturb your process. So their role is actually to trust that you know what to do. And I've seen this with my clients, with my wonderful star student, Rebecca. I watched this firsthand when she gave birth to her baby after 2 previous C-sections back in October. And I watched how this couple who had started off where he was sort of understanding like this was something that she really needed to do, but he wasn't 100% on board, and he was a little bit scared, and he's like, what do we do with the placenta? I do have a video about that, by the way. I just posted it inside of the YouTube channel, and it's also inside of the archives of Facebook, so in our Facebook group. So you can always go in and check that out later to find out what the heck to do with the placenta, because I have a video on that. So he basically was like, what do I do with the placenta? What if this happens? What if that happens? And we worked together for 3 months. Basically, I had already given Rebecca everything that she needed. And then her partner, we would bring him on sessions, and we would talk about those fears, and we would have those conversations and the what ifs. And then I would give him the information, and then he'd walk away and he'd be like, okay, I know what to do now. So by the time that birth happened, not only was he on board with home birth, he was the biggest supporter for her, and he was holding space for her the whole time. So she would be in her element, she'd be laying in the pool, and she'd just be resting and sleeping. And all of a sudden she would have one of the surges, one of the contractions, and he could tell as soon as it was starting. And then he quickly rushed over and he gave her water, or he squeezed her hips, or whatever he knew that she needed in that moment. And that's what we did for the hours of her labor, until finally it resulted with her pushing in the pool and him standing behind her and being like, oh, the baby's coming, and catching that baby, bringing that baby up out of the water, and then helping her get into the position that she needed to get into so that she could lay back in the water and have the baby still to her chest, skin to skin, with the cord still attached. And it was just the most amazing experience. And once I saw that, the power of the right support, which I talk about with my 5 pillars of empowerment, but with that right support in place, then you have that protector. Your partner needs to be in that protector role. But if they're scared, they can't really do their job of protecting you, because now they're also dealing with their own fears. So the way around this is that there's actually no way around it other than to tackle those fears. And they're all different. So even if we think we know what our partner is afraid of, it might not be it. And I've been doing a lot of reading about relationships lately, because I went through a relationship that didn't serve me. And now I'm learning how communication could have been better if I'd been in a relationship that was actually good for me. And understanding, oh, okay, so there's different ways of doing this. First of all, if you want a home birth badly, you need to tell them why. You need to go deep with your why. You need to sit your partner down and you have to say, look, I get that you're scared, and I hear you, and I support your fear on this. However, I'm scared too. And this is what I'm afraid of. I'm afraid that if I go back into that hospital where I know they have a C-section rate that's really high, where I know that their restrictions on VBAC basically means that I'm going to have to fight them on everything that I don't want, including vaginal exams, which I know aren't going to work for me, and they're going to constantly pester me, and I just know that that's not a safe environment for me. I don't feel safe there. If I if I'm there, I'm probably going to end up having another C-section. And I can't do another C-section. It made me feel so bad afterwards. I felt like my body was broken. Like I can't birth my baby. I don't have the ability to birth, and it's not okay. And I know I can do this, and I need you to support me. So how can we work through these fears that you have? And what can I do to support you so that you can feel better about this? Come at it from that point of view. And eventually he will start to get to the point where it's like, okay, like she really does understand, but she's also really scared. And I want to make sure that she feels safe. Because if she doesn't feel safe over in the hospital, then I can see how that's just not going to be a good environment. And then from the other side of it, you can be like, sweetheart, like this is what I see for our future, is that I really want you to be able to catch your own baby. Like I've seen these stories, these moms, and they have their partners with them, and it's just this beautiful experience, and you can't get that in a hospital. And can I just show you some stuff? And then you take him and you show him some home birth videos. There are so many out there with partners holding space, and they're just absolutely beautiful. And one thing that I share, this video, of course, you'd have to buy yourself, but it's called Birth with Gloria LeMay. And I share this video with my clients specifically so that they can see multiple different home births and multiple different types of settings within home birth. One had a cord wrapped around the neck. Another one was a VBAC. Another one was an older couple. Another one was like a bigger baby. And they all had these amazing dynamics with the partners. We're just holding and supporting. And if he sees that, he may start to shift his mind just a little bit. But you really need to come to it from a place of that vulnerability. And that can be really hard if your relationship doesn't feel solid. So that's why it's important that when you are creating this baby together, that you're also talking to your partner and you're sharing and you're working on your relationship at the same time and you're understanding communication, and then you can sit together and you can talk. One thing I do with my clients is that I'll sit there and I'll talk to the partner and I'll say, hey, what are your fears around this? I've talked in depth with your partner here, and she's telling me that this is what she wants. And how do you feel about that? And how can we basically collaborate? Because like you made this baby together, you're going to be parents together of this baby. If you've had kids before, now it's growing to your family, like you're constantly changing. This is a new transition. And the birth of the baby is also going to birth a new version of your relationship. So let's really explore those fears so you can have that connection on the other side. And this is what I do, is I sit there and I talk to them and I ask them those questions. So that's what you want to do. You want to find out exactly what your partner is afraid of. And here's what you don't want to do. Even if you're thinking it, here's what you don't want to do. You don't want to make him feel like that fear is stupid. You don't want to make him feel like that fear is wrong. Think about how it would be if you had a fear and somebody said, oh, that's stupid. You don't need to worry about that. Something like, I'm scared of the epidural because I'm scared of needles. And they say, oh, you're not going to care about that in the moment because labor is so much worse. Or, I'm kind of scared of tearing. And they're like, oh, who cares? Like, you're going to tear anyway. You got to get over that. Or just have a C-section. Birth is going to be traumatic no matter what you do. Like, that doesn't make you feel very good, does it? No. So you don't want to do that to your partner. The last thing you want to do is say, look, all of this fear you have, like, I'm not going to die. I'm not going to bleed out. Like, what the hell? Like, you're just ridiculous. No. Men can be quite logical. And if your partner happens to be in the masculine energy, he may be logical as well. So what you could say is, I hear your fear. I can see how that would be really frightening for you. And I hear you. And I would like I've read some stuff. Would you be interested in reading it? And then you go out and you get that resource that has the statistics that shows that the vaginal birth after cesarean rate is higher with a physiological birth at home than it is in a hospital. And then you start showing him other things like the business of being born. I am going to give you one little cautionary tale on that, that a client had, well, a prospective client had brought up with me in the past. And she said, well, I let him watch it, and then we got to the end. And then what happened is that he was not on board because they ended up at the end of the movie. The last person that Ricky Lake talked to ended up going in and saying, I'm glad I had a C-section. And then that just basically shut the door. So be aware of that, and also know that when that comes up, you can be like, well, maybe in that case it was for them, but I really want to make sure that the C-section is my choice, not the choice of the establishment. So what if we just tried at home, and then if I feel like I want to go, then we can revisit that. Because here's another thing that I tell my clients and the students in my programs and everyone that I talk to. It's quite simple. A hospital birth is just a home birth transfer. Even if it's a planned hospital birth, it's still a home birth transfer, because you're automatically laboring at home. Like, you start your labor at home, and then you transfer to a place where you're choosing to give birth. So if you're choosing to stay home and birth at home, but at any point you change your mind, that's a hospital transfer. And if you're planning a hospital birth and you're laboring at home for most of it, it's still a hospital, it's still a home birth transfer to hospital. So another thing I can't get into today, but I would love to talk about this more in the future, is just the concept of early labor is really to help you get into that birth space that you want to get into to feel safe. For some of us, it's a hospital, and others, it's a home birth. And if you're feeling so much anxiety and stress about the hospital, that's already not the best place for you. You don't want it. So your partner needs to understand about, you need to have that right environment. He needs to understand about physiological birth. He needs to understand about your fears and your doubts and your desires for what you really want to create and how he fits into it. All right, so one more thing is that with VBAC specifically, and this is something I see so often, is that if you're being told by your care provider that you're not allowed, that nobody will support you, the fact is that they've forgotten that the default exit of a baby is the vagina, and that they don't actually have to support you, because you are going to be the one doing the birthing. And all they have to do is sit back and sit on their hands and watch as you birth your baby. And if at any point you feel that something is wrong, and you really tap into that, and you really are working through those fears your entire pregnancy, and you have your partner to also support you, then you'll know if it's actually time to transfer or it's actually time to choose a cesarean. But if you're in an environment where everybody is telling you that you're not allowed to do something, that in itself is incredibly stressful, and it breaks my heart. And that is why my passion is to educate you. And if you really love this video and you want to know more, you can always send me a message, or hey, better yet, tell people about this, because there are so many moms out there and I cannot reach them all on my own. And I just got another one who sent me a message, and she's like, you know, I've gone to every single care provider I possibly can, and nobody will let me have a vaginal birth after 3 cesareans. And it's so devastating. And then when you have your partner on top of that, believing that and getting that fear, it can feel like such an uphill battle. But if you have your partner on board, and I just want to give this one little takeaway, if you have them on board, then you can still find a way. Because let me tell you a quick story about my friend Wendy. Wendy had 3 cesareans. The first one, she was induced. The second one, she was basically rescheduled for a C-section, even though she wanted a VBAC. The third one, she thought she didn't have any options, so she just scheduled a C-section. And then for her fourth, she was much older. She had a higher, she was a bigger person, so she was basically fat shamed within the system. And they said, you're too old, you're too fat, and you've had 3 C-sections. There's no way that you can have a VBAC. Well, guess what? My lovely friend Wendy had a VBAC. She had a vaginal birth after 3 cesareans after being told by everybody in our health authority that it wasn't allowed to happen. She was told multiple times that she couldn't do it. But her partner, her wonderful, wonderful husband, he supported her. And whenever the doctor kept saying, well, that's not standard of care, he stood up and he said, well, we don't want standard of care. We want our care. So are you going to be supportive of my wife or not? And so he had his own, he was standing as the protector. So that's how powerful having your partner on board really is. Because in the end, the reason Wendy got that was not just because of her own determination, but because her partner stood by her and was willing to stay there and be her voice, even in an environment that was just very stressful. And I see this quite a lot with partners who stand by and support you and tell you, it's okay, we'll find a way. I'll stand by you. I will agree to whatever you want because this is your birth, this is your body, and I trust in your ability to do this, and I will hold space for you. So, just again, remember, find out what their fears are, work through them, empathize, and then work to get him into a place where he starts to see just what's possible on the other side, because birth can be so amazingly connective for you and your partner. Way better than calling him from up the stairs and saying, hey, I just had the baby. If you want to hear more stories about that, I do have an article. I think it's called Women Who Won't Go by my friend Gloria. And it was pretty fascinating what she shared as well. But I really don't recommend that route. Your partner deserves to be part of the experience if you want them there. You deserve to have that beautiful connective thing. You don't need to birth alone without your partner just to take control of your body back. And there is a way to do that. All right. I will see you next week. Bye.